Good morning, everyone. We'll give everyone a few more minutes as they trickle in. I'd like to apologize firstly because right before my meeting, right before I went on stage here, my internet went out. So right now I'm on my hotspot. So forgive me if the internet connection isn't that great. I'll be checking in my router in a moment just to make sure that that's working okay. But I do apologize for the inconvenience. Let's give it a minute or so. Thank you. Okay, I think. And it's back up and running. Can anyone confirm if they can hear me? Tanja, I think you're fine. Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Tanja, for confirming. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this beautiful Wednesday morning, afternoon, maybe some evening for some of you all. I think we are good to get started. So let's do this here. I'm going to go and share my screen. And I may share a couple of things here, some handouts, but bear with me, okay? Let me know if you cannot see my screen. Hopefully that's totally fine here. There we go. Alrighty, everyone. So kicking it off here. My name is En Romero, and today I'd like to walk you all through 5 lessons I've learned as I navigated Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Now, this is totally because we're talking about Salesforce Commerce Cloud. I don't want you all thinking these skills aren't or these lessons aren't transferable. They totally are on any kind of e-com solution that you're working off of. But in my case, given my extensive experience within Commerce Cloud, these are the 5 lessons I picked up on. Now, before we get started, just want to make sure you all are aware. If you want to contact me, you can reach me at my email, edwin@edwindanromero.com, through LinkedIn or Pragmatic SEO. I'm going to go ahead and share my newsletter right here. If you guys want to go ahead and subscribe, please have at it. I'm glad to have you in my list. So for today, I like to talk through 2 major agenda items, one smaller than the other. My biography, essentially my history, how I got here, and then ultimately what fed into the 5 lessons that we're going to walk through, and ultimately those 5 lessons themselves. Those 5 lessons are going to be comprised of an ecosystem, what I've learned through navigating an ecosystem such as Salesforce Commerce Cloud, the fact that, how can you leverage your team, why a team is honestly critical for your Commerce Cloud initiatives, and ultimately how to improve your communication amongst your team members, particularly your developers. Lastly, well, not lastly, second to last, I should say, how to appropriately prioritize some of these initiatives you have for SEO on Commerce Cloud. And lastly, coming to terms with yourself as an SEOer navigating such a robust platform. Okay. So with that, my biography. I have 10 years of SEO experience. I'm not bragging, but with that, it's afforded me a lot of experiences around both small businesses, medium-sized organizations, and honestly, Fortune 500 organizations. But things really ramped up as I began my experience or my career within Salesforce Commerce Cloud. At this point, I have approximately 7 years of experience on the platform, all of which really fed through by migration projects, taking websites from their legacy platforms on over to their Commerce Cloud platform, strategy, essentially building out a roadmap based on not just search trends, but also ideal business goals around acquiring users on over to Commerce Cloud. And lastly, technical initiatives, technical SEO, that is reviewing the infrastructure of a website, a Commerce Cloud website, to make sure that it houses best practices, not just for search engines, but more importantly for users. And lastly, we're here. We're talking about the 5 lessons that I've gathered through working with Commerce Cloud. Okay. Now, let's dive into these 5 lessons, shall we? The first, and probably the most important, Commerce Cloud is a beast. It's just so robust and it's easy to get lost in. And if you find yourself navigating through Commerce Cloud kind of stumbling, that's okay. That's okay. Let's take a look at exactly, well, from our perspective as SEOers, how the dynamic may look like. The first and foremost, it's a massive ecosystem. We have SEO here, and we have certain settings and functionality that appeals to us, including page meta tag rules, site map configuration, robots.txt configuration, and the like, and like, honestly, a lot more than just that. But similar to SEO, where we have the settings and features that matter most to us, there are other team members that also have those settings and configurations that matter to them. Now, it may not be SEO specific, but it's stuff, it's honestly configurations that they care about in their work stream. Now, to complicate things a little bit further, there may be overlapping settings and features between the various groups. And with that, there's a lot of overlap that exists between these various teams. There might be something that can be achievable for SEO that's also relevant to developers, merchandising content. Developers honestly are honestly all over the place, so they may be configuring settings across the board. Um, so this kind of overlapping these overlapping settings and features do complicate things as it relates to, well, where can I find this? Where can I find that? But adding on to the complication in this ecosystem is the fact that we also are looping in third parties, whether it be through email, through ratings and reviews. There are other technologies that we play alongside. What's more, this makes up the tech stack, so the technology that is actually driving the Commerce Cloud experience, all of which we may be privy to, we may need, we may not need, but confuses us nonetheless. Lastly, there are a slew of things that we do not know that impact Commerce Cloud, how certain settings and configurations play with one another. That includes pieces of the tech stack as well as third parties. So that being said, that does leave the room for confusion. How do we perceive this? First and foremost, it's going to be okay. It's all right. I think sometimes as individuals we're harder on ourselves than we need to be. We're SEOers, first and foremost. So that goes into our level of familiarity around our SEO. In a second, give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that things. Okay, cool. So as far as SEO familiarity goes, we're used to the WordPresses, the Shopifys. These are platforms that their settings are very intuitive, easy to navigate. There's extensive documentation that exists online and honestly sometimes in your organization. It has very nimble behavior. It doesn't require code changes. You can probably even use extensions, plugins, add-ons, and the like to get the experience that you're looking for. And lastly, there are thriving communities behind these platforms. So with that, we are kind of have bias that all platforms after that should have the same experience. But taking a step further, if we've only worked in enterprise level solutions, we might be familiar with this dynamic where honestly we're passing the baton. We're passing on the responsibility to developers or our main points of contact. We're forwarding our recommendations to our POCs, and they're taking it from there. Now, with Commerce Cloud, it's a little bit different. It's very hands-on as very hands-on as it relates to things like metadata, robots, sitemaps, redirects. It's all possible. There is some limited documentation, but there is documentation. The documentation includes, well, it's my opportunity to plug my SEO guide, my Salesforce Commerce Cloud SEO guide, as well as the Salesforce portal itself, the B2C commerce portal, where it has extensive documentation. So there is how-tos. You have to weed through some of the details, but it's possible to find where to find some of this documentation. Now, I will say there is a growing community, Trailblazer, as well as the unofficial Slack. We have Tomas on the line, which he's huge into both Trailblazer and Slack. So thank you for joining, Tomas. If you're curious about, if you're curious about reading my SEO guide, please have at it. I'm going to go and share it right now. Bookmark it. Beautiful. I think I have shared it. Beautiful. Cool. So where does that leave us as SEOers? As you may note as we progress through this presentation, it's going to be significant to build relationships. Just like Iron Man, who can't fight evil by himself, we as SEOers cannot take on the responsibility of optimizing a site on our own. We need developers, we need UX, content, BAs, QAs, project managers, program managers, analytics, and account managers. So it's okay if you feel overwhelmed, but I will say this: as far as my SEO career goes on Commerce Cloud, it's benefited greatly, and mostly because I've built these relationships with these other external parties or these other parties. And I encourage you to do the same, which is a nice little segue to this one, this section here. This lesson here is you can't do it alone. You really can't. SEO, we're limited to a certain settings and features. Um, to kind of highlight that, let's talk about the SEO potential here. Let's say we have a website. This website is a pyramid, and we're just trying to get across it, and we're this little orange ball. As an SEO, or we try to climb it, and as farther as we climb up, the opportunity begins to grow more, the potential and performance along with it. But also, what we're finding is the effort to climb against this gravity, in our case, which is Salesforce Commerce Cloud, also increases. Now, as we reach the tippity top, we might find ourselves through various conversations with executives, with the larger brand teams, that, hey, you know what? We just released this new product line, we're pivoting our strategy, so on and so forth. Well, guess what? The potential increased as well. So what we thought was closer to the top is actually just really the tip of the iceberg in a manner of speaking, in that the opportunity is way better, more than we thought. That said, the SEO potential on a given project is endless. I mean, we're talking about not just new categories, new content, new strategies, but we're talking about new technologies, new, search engine behaviors, new things that come out in the industry that may pivot how we optimize a specific site. So, looking at this from Commerce Cloud specifically, the out-of-the-box configuration limitation dilemma. So we have the current configurations, which in a lot of cases are totally manageable by SEOers. Looking at the page meta tag rules, looking at specific attributes around page titles, meta descriptions on categories, subcategories, products, content, so on and so forth. All of that is very manageable through to SEOers. We might hit some snags as we continue to push the boundaries of the out-of-the-box configurations. For example, I was migrating a site a couple years ago, and we were hitting a cap at what we can redirect within dynamic and static mapping. So what we ended up doing was leaning on generic mapping, which I believe, I'm not sure if it's a customization or an out-of-the-box feature. Regardless, it was a solution we had to use. That wasn't something that we were too familiar with at the time, so we had to lean on our development counterparts to implement. That being said, we couldn't do it on our own. And I suggest you all not taking this responsibility on your own. You have to be a part of a team. As it relates to beyond the out-of-the-box configurations, there are customizations that are seen as strategic initiatives. And now these can include things like ratings and reviews, specific content features, and so on and so forth. But to implement these, you need development counterparts. You need to lean on your third parties. Otherwise, we can't do it unless we're the developer, we're the third party, and all that. But by and large, the goal, what I'm trying to state here, is we cannot do it on our own. Which leads me to budgets. So an aspect of this is everything costs money. And if we look at our budgets as this bucket, it's finite. There is only so much money and investment and dollars to go around. As each initiative chips away at the budget, we want to make sure that ultimately we get some of the budget, because ultimately, at the end, if we don't speak up for ourselves, we get very minimal budget for our initiatives, whether they be out of the box or whether they be customizations. What you can do to obtain some of this budget, in my experience, is identify the executive sponsors, so the main stakeholders. In our case, we have an executive here. We have to identify, if we're new to an organization that runs their e-com site off of Commerce Cloud, we have to identify what the goals, the KPIs are that are important and significant to the executive team. We have to identify and understand performance thus far, and ultimately what the strategic roadmap before and after looks like to identify the priorities therein. From there on out, we can start building a case for what a budget might look like. A budget that may include things like customizations, the various tools that we will need to accomplish SEO, around reporting and research and whatnot, the various projects that we want to engage in, and ultimately the various SEO partners that we want to loop into the fold as we optimize our Commerce Cloud site. So this is very high level, but it's important to build relationships with your main stakeholders, your executives, alongside your developers, alongside your PMs and whatnot. Now, juggling projects. I'm not sure how many of you all have worked with any project managers, program managers, but at the highest level possible, they are the individuals or the team that orchestrates the success of any one project or program. That being said, these are critical stakeholders for you to befriend. They have access to resources around development, analytics, content, UX, QA, and soon to be SEO. Now, although there may not be budgets for SEO, it's significant to understand what is on the project or program manager's mind as it relates to these various projects. Now, as you begin to acquaint yourself with these PMs, you have an understanding of what the budgets look like, what the timelines are, the scrums, and I'll talk about scrums in a moment, and the existing tickets and issues. Speaking to scrums specifically, if you have not, if it just for an understanding, a scrum is essentially a periodic meeting between the various stakeholders that exist out there. This is primarily around developers and project managers, but can include other stakeholders like content, QA, and the like, depending on the project. Now, they're not super long. They're, from what I've seen, they're daily. Sometimes they happen 3 times a week. They're 15 minutes to 30 minutes at most, but they are phenomenal opportunities for you to voice SEO, for you to come in and ask, hey, where are we with this SEO initiative? So it doesn't get forgotten. All of this, honestly, all of this, the reason why I'm bringing up this information around teams and budgets and the like is because you need to build SEO advocates. As an SEOer or an individual driving SEO campaigns, you need people by your side, so you need advocates. In my experience, the investment to build these relationships and ultimately these advocates is very high at the beginning, but oh my goodness, it is so worthwhile. After a while, I've told individuals, when I start a new project, I'm ear to the ground all the time at the onset of a project. I'm hours on end in specific meetings, but it trickles down. Reason being is because I put a face to the name. I represent SEO and I build these relationships with the PMs, the devs, content, UX. Now, I'm not the only advocate. Now the PM is an advocate. Now the dev is an advocate. The content team is an advocate. So it goes on and on. The goal is to build relationships, but also build advocates for your organization. Okay. Ticket details improve efficiency. I think this is a significant one. What's a support ticket, you may ask? Well, in any one Salesforce Commerce Cloud site, you have things moving along pretty well, but like any other architecture, like any other home or house or building, it may require repair, maintenance, investigation. There are bugs or issues, or there may be enhancements that you want to partake on your specific site. Um, Honestly, a support ticket is just a request to investigate or resolve. By and large, this takes place in a ticketing system such as Jira. My recommendation here is, if you're not familiar with Jira, get familiar with Jira. Get access to Jira. You may ask yourself, well, you know what? I'm an SEO. I really don't need access to Jira because that's managed by a development team. And that may be true. That might be true. The dynamic in your organization as it relates to Commerce Cloud is that developers or PMs manage tickets, but there's a ton of value as you as an SEO to be involved in the ticket creation, monitoring, and ultimately QAing. Now, I want to outline what a bad ticket does. A bad support ticket kind of looks like this. The name is Fix Schema, and the description reads, we are being penalized for schema errors. See audit. With this ticket alone, we get we may encounter a ton of questions from our development team, including, well, what's being affected? What's wrong with it? Where's the issue found? Why is it important? Who's it affecting it? How should it function? And Now I have to learn SEO. All of these questions come up with such a vague ticket, bad ticket, and the response from developers might not be a positive one. With that, a bad ticket honestly is deprioritized. If there are no details, why should we prioritize this ticket that isn't structured optimally versus these tickets here that have all the robust details with the proper requirements in place? It gets deprioritized. A bad ticket lacks funding. It doesn't get an investment. How can we invest into something when we don't know what the effort is going to look like? Lastly, it wastes resources. Even if you have details, they have to be the proper details. Otherwise, for example, if you don't have the proper requirements, then a solution is built without confines. You may have to backtrack at a later time, costing time, money, and resources. So, what can you do as an SEOer? Well, an ideal ticket, honestly, it details the issue. It strikes a balance between the right amount of detail versus too much detail. You want to make sure you get the core information around where it's found, who's it affecting, how it should look like, and the like. It uses assumptions very carefully. We as SEOers, we don't know code, we don't know certain functionality around some technologies, and it's okay to admit that and call that out on the ticket because honestly, if it's an investigative ticket, you can have the development or technical resource investigate that on your behalf if there are limitations. Lastly, stay relevant. There's no point in looping in information that doesn't enhance or contribute to the overall success of the ticket. For example, if your content is being impaired by JavaScript, just say that. Don't go into the history of JavaScript, rather how the functionality or experience is being inhibited. It's pretty straightforward, but the right balance. Now, I think for a lot of us, it's important to come to terms with everything is not a priority within Commerce Cloud. Multiple priorities. Let's walk through a scenario here. We have Charlie, the CMO. He has multiple teams. He wants to improve the Commerce Cloud blog performance, but he's bound by limitations on budget and resources. He hired Sean, the SEOer. He reads Neil Patel's blog. He's completed a SEMrush audit and wants to make SEO history. Now, the impact of general lists when things aren't properly prioritized. Sean knows what he wants to tackle for SEO. So he calls out our SEO priorities are on-page content, better header tags, better authority, improved internal links. But to Charlie, this is just an aggregate of content tasks. Nothing's really prioritized. So we don't really know how to allocate proper budgets to the various projects Sean's recommending. So what ends up happening is Charlie declines. Sean is sad. Now, let's pivot this perspective so that we look at a specific matrix here. I'm not sure how many of you all have used this kind of impact versus effort model or matrix. Essentially, everything that is high impact, high effort, this is stuff that we want to roadmap unless it's extraordinarily critical to the business. However, if it's low effort, super high impact, stuff that we want to take care in the interim. We take the list that Sean has provided previously and ultimately break it out even further, make it a lot more granular. Rather than provide just little bullets of the content tasks, we take individual content tasks and assign it with the impact and ultimately effort. I won't walk through each individual one of these. These are all honestly pertaining to a recent blog where we recommended various optimizations. But you can see here now, Charlie can say, you know what, we can look for something around above the fold content, how to optimize that as we roadmap and continue to work towards paragraph blocks. So with this approach, you kind of level set with what you expect to knock out both in the short term and in the long term for your Commerce Cloud content. Now, what are the reactions from here? Charlie approves. Sean is pretty ecstatic with it, and now they're closer to having a long-term strategic roadmap for SEO on the Commerce Cloud blog. This next one here, it's important to note, is that SEOers, we wear many different hats, honestly, and it's more of more of just coming to terms with that. The dynamic of an SEO, I feel strongly that we are pivotal, extraordinarily pivotal as it comes to the success of any one Commerce Cloud website. We're foundational to it. Yeah, I would say yes, we are foundational, but we also impact these various other teams throughout any part of the maturity of a website. We talk to the devs, we talk to design, we talk to UX, content accessibility, web apps, but more than anything, we influence what goes on. We influence what happens across these other teams. And honestly, it's not just keywords. I think there's a misconception that SEOers, we just need to provide the keywords, and then ultimately those keywords get input into a pre-existing content piece. It's not it. SEOers are meant to optimize the user experience on any one given site, Commerce Cloud included. And with that, honestly, we have to talk to these various other disciplines. We have to talk to dev, design, UX, and so forth, because all of those, their end goal is also optimize the user experience. So with that, we marry our skill sets. We work alongside these various teams and we build relationships with these various teams, so we can honestly have a great user experience for the search user. That is all. I know we went through that relatively quick, and I hope that it was educational. I hope that you all got something out of this. It was for Commerce Cloud. Well, these are 5 lessons that I took away from working within Commerce Cloud. But again, the lessons and skill sets that I've acquired are transferable to honestly any other site solution out there. So what I'll do now at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up to any comments, questions. We'll love to hear what folks think online. If they feel like I haven't covered anything, happy to speak to. All right. Well, I don't see any questions come through. If you are looking to go ahead and see this video at a later time, you certainly can. I'm going to go ahead and upload the recording to YouTube. If you want, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I will upload it before the end of the week. If there are any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out. Always happy to talk through Commerce Cloud even further. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great morning, afternoon, or evening. All the best.